open the door on this first session that we have with us. I am truly delighted to welcome to the stage the wonderful Robin. Now, Robin, I don't know if you've got slides to share right now.
I have. I will pop my slides up.
Fantastic. So whilst Robin is sharing the slides that we will be looking at over the next few minutes, I know that she's then going to, or they're going to then use me as a guinea pig and see if this stuff works. So I shall be listening intently with regards to what Robin has to say. As we're working through this, if you do have questions for Robin or just comments to make, do please feel free to pop them into the chat, and that will mean that we'll be able to bring you in on the discussion as well. So I'm just going to take a little look to make sure that we're getting the slides.
My Zoom available. Just crashed, Sarah, so I've been let back into the meeting. So
yay!
You can see my slides now.
We can not only see the slides, but you're back in the meeting. That is how smooth the team have got things running at the moment.
Incredible.
It's incredible. So once we've got over that, congratulations. Well done, everybody. That was awesome. I'm going to pass over to the wonderful Robin. Thank you very much, Robin.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm really excited to hear about the other talks this afternoon. I almost wish they'd gone first because I feel like they'd feed really well into some of the things that I'd like to cover. But we'll come back to them in the panel at the end, I guess. So really something to look forward to. But yeah, just welcome everyone and thanks very much for being here. So my role generally is a coach and organisational development consultant, and I'm very much not the expert when it comes to responsible raw materials or raw materials generally. However, my first job after university was in fact for a geoscience training company. So I'm actually super excited to be back here because I always found there was something really exciting about being with people who are working with like the Earth's raw materials. I was such a nerd for rocks and minerals as a child. So thank you for having me back. It's like I've come full circle. So this is just setting out a couple of objectives and agenda, but really I'll be covering a very simple technique, which I hope will be useful and interesting to you, and won't be spending much time talking, I hope. So let's progress. So a few reasons why collaboration is so necessary in the world of making your value chains more sustainable. I don't want to patronize you because I think, to be honest, at a human to human level, you very much understand, likely much better than I do, why it's so important for us to collaborate to address these huge global issues. I pulled a few of the Sustainable Development Goals onto this slide. But I think I'd love to hear if anyone who's listening wants to pop anything in the chat about your personal reasons for collaboration. Like why is it important to you and to your organization to actually go beyond the boundaries? So leading up to today, I asked some of the Satala people what did they consider the main barriers to collaboration within the raw materials sector. And they gave me back 3 challenges, which I've sort of paraphrased here. And I'll briefly cover them. But what I want to say to begin with is what really struck me about these 3 challenges is they are the same challenges that I've come across when I've been working with the National Health Service on their barriers to collaboration as well. So a completely different sector, also facing this very, very significant need to go beyond their traditional competitive model and actually work together to address what is otherwise quite a catastrophic situation in the health sector. So you're really not alone. But yeah, just looking quickly at these 3 challenges, there was a perception, or there's often a perception, that there'll be different incentives within organizations and that those different incentives will lead to misalignment and like different expectations or incompatible expectations with regards to the collaboration. And the second one is around really not having that kind of shared understanding about what each organization actually brings to the value chain. There's often a sense of, well, our role is the most important role, we're the experts here, and that can lead to a lack of respect. And then finally, there's a real sense that when there's a failure in the supply chain or somewhere in the process of collaboration, there's a sense of self-protection for the organizations, which really closes down collaboration, leading to a lack of transparency and a kind of like grabbing the resources for your own organization. But in the long term, that's extremely damaging to the relationship. So what's really common to all of these three is trust and a lack of trust in the first place, and also damage to trust through behaviors. And obviously that's a key to what you're talking about in this conference, which I'm so pleased to hear. So what do we do about this? The art of culture change. So I work with organizations on internal culture in many facets of their work. And we often talk about this iceberg model, where what we often see on the surface is people's behavior, but that's driven underneath the surface by policies, procedures, and processes, or policies, procedures, and rules, I should say. And then right at the bottom, at this deepest level, we've got people's beliefs and values. And there's work to be done at all three of these levels, but the point of this iceberg model is really that if you're not addressing the beliefs and values, it's very difficult to make real change at the higher levels. But equally, the lowest level tends to be the most difficult level to work at. But I have what I think is very good news, which is this little tool which I'd love to share with you today, which is called reflective listening. And it's my belief that through this one tool, you can actually address all three of these levels of culture change. So reflective listening is a behavior, but through carrying out reflective listening, we actually can discover shared values, we can surface values and come to a place of better alignment. And through this process of reflective listening, we can also find out where the processes are actually getting in the way of effective collaboration. So this is the bit which poor Sarah is has very, very gamely been volunteered to help me to demonstrate. I mean, ordinarily I would be running this as a workshop, and I would, you know, in an ideal world, I would have loved to have breakout rooms where everyone can actually have a go at this themselves, because it is one of those things where really just practicing it yourself, you'll get a much better understanding of the value of it. But I still think it's going to be really insightful, hopefully, to have Sarah, who's not been prepared for this. She doesn't know what I'm going to ask her to do, to, in front of everybody, give it her best shot. And and so we'll go with that. So first of all, Sarah, I'm not going to ask you to do this technique first. I'm going to demonstrate how it's done with your help. So, but just to quickly run through the steps. So reflective listening is really as simple as it sounds. It's first of all just listening to. So let's put it in a context. So you're meeting with someone from a different organization, and you're trying to like brainstorm something that you think needs to work better in order to collaborate better. So the first stance that I'm inviting you to take is listen in order to understand. So while you're listening, if you need to, you should ask for pauses so that you can check your understanding, rather than just listening to someone for minutes on end, losing the trail. Actually understanding is vital to this process. And then repeating back in these pauses what you've understood so far. And if you need any clarity on what you've heard, ask at that point. And then once you've reflected it back, just check in, have I understood you correctly? Before moving on, if there's anything else they want to share. And I put a bonus here at the bottom, which is additional to the typical reflective listening technique, but it can actually really, really positively impact a sense of building trust and empathy between the parties. So after listening to what the person said in full, there's an invitation to consider what matters most to that person and reflect it back to them by saying, what seems to matter most to you is ... something like that. So let's give it a go, Sarah. And you don't know what I'm going to ask you, but I'm aiming for about, I think we've got a little bit of extra time. So 3 or 4 minutes kind of thing. And I'd love to ask you to tell me about something that personally impacted you so far in the conference. And I will reflect back to you as we go. And I'm just going to stop sharing if that's okay, so that we can really see each other a little bit better.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Robin. Okay, so something that has personally impacted me during the course of this conference so far. So I think the most personal story for me, and something that I found very interesting to reflect on, was this morning a friend who I did a lot of traveling with 20 years ago came and gave a talk. So Quinton Newcomb, who is now a lawyer, he's a judge, which I think is really very impressive, of course, having met him so long ago. But the reason why he came and spoke to us today was not only because he was describing what does trust mean and look like from a legal perspective, but also as a judge, but also because I went down my first ever mine with him 20 years ago. And that mine, as we were discussing this morning, it's an artisanal mine. So it's one that doesn't make use of big mechanized machines. It is in Bolivia. So it's in a very poor part of the world. And the history of this mine is really one of historically exploitation. So
can I just stop you there just to check? So because there's a lot of a lot of things that I'm tracking, and I just want to check that I'm on the same page as you. So it sounds like there was a particular talk this morning with someone who you had a really personal connection with. Quinton Newcomb, is that the right name?
Yeah, that's correct.
So, and he's now a judge. He was previously a lawyer.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago, you went backpacking with him, and you actually visited this mine in Bolivia. And I think I'm understanding that this mine it's a low tech mine. So you said artisanal, there wasn't the machines and things. And you were just about to talk about exploitation in that context. Yeah, have I got everything so far?
Perfect, and much more eloquently put. So thank you very much for that, Robin. So yeah, with regards to this mine, so the reason I guess why it's resonating with me is it's a very personal story, and I can remember how I felt when we went deep underground. So we got taken underground through all of these little tunnels where you were sliding along on your tummy and you were going down ladders with all the rungs missing. So just using the nails on the side of the bits of the wood to climb down into what really did feel like the depths of the earth. We were probably actually very shallow, but at the time it felt like we were a long way underground, and it was dark. So yeah, we had little head torches, but it was very dark, and all you could hear, other than your own breathing, and of course the person in front of you and the person behind you as we were going deeper into the mountain, was the tap, tap, tap of people chipping away at rock within this silver mine. So people were mining for silver. And that was something where, and reading my diary last night with regards to that experience, I was so naive. There was so much that I was surprised by at the time. And I think that the talk this morning just really got me thinking, not necessarily during the talk itself, but reflecting on it, of how much your opinions and your feelings can change when you become more knowledgeable about something. So that was a case where understanding the mining itself was really interesting. Knowing what I know today, would I have gone deep into that mine with almost no health or safety? Probably not. I don't think I'd be brave enough to do that now. But in terms of understanding the context in which people were still mining in that environment, was absolutely phenomenal for someone when I was 20 years younger than I am now.
Yeah. So amazing story, and I'm really getting a sense from when you were describing that trip down to the mine that experience still feels like it's very much in you. You can still remember how it felt to be climbing down those rungs like the rungless ladders, just hanging onto the nails, and going through those really narrow tunnels on your tummy, and just having that, the way you describe the tap tap tap, it was very evocative. Yeah, and I noticed that there was the time lapse since then, and that the experience that your career has taken you on has really given you much more of an insight into what it was that you were actually letting yourself in for at that time. And but at the same time, you were very glad that you had that experience, so that it actually gives you an embodied sense of what it's like to be in the mining industry in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was something where, so when I was down that mine, it was slightly more than 20 years ago, to be brutally honest. I'm making myself feel younger than I actually am. So that was just before I went to university. And I went to university to study geography initially. This is where Richard Harrington falls over, because he thinks I'm a geologist. I started off studying geography, but in a Scottish university, you do 3 subjects in your first year, and then you begin to specialize. So I did geography, geology, and environmental science. And it in part was having been down that mine and begun to understand, okay, so what is it about these rocks that was, I think, one of the little seeds in the back of my mind that began to say, hang on, there's something very interesting with regards to all of this in terms of where our raw materials come from. And
Sarah, I'm just going to have to pause you there, sorry, just because of time. And I just wanted to end that reflection by just noting that as you went on your degree, that geography degree course, you had actually, because you'd had that experience, it gave you that kind of question mark of, okay, there's something here, there's something about this reality that actually concerns me.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was something that concerned me about it, and I said, okay, I found it fascinating, very curious about it, and also thinking, should we be doing that now in this day and age, or should we be able to harvest these materials in a more responsible way?
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. So it's really specifically around, like, how is there not a way of doing this more responsibly? Yeah. So that really nicely just takes us to what seems to really matter to you, and why you're in fact here today doing this conference. So thanks for that.
Pleasure.
Yeah, and just in terms of getting through the rest of it on time, I'd just love to ask you for like 1 or 2 sentences about how that felt for you to be listened to in that way.
So it felt that you were actually listening to me rather than just suffering my little telling of a story. And thank you as well for allowing me to tell a story that doesn't often get told with regards to something from my past. So it felt comforting and I guess empowering as well. So it meant that I could actually not change the story, but actually change where I was taking it to try and kind of say, okay, you are listening to me, great, I can ratchet it up a notch, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great insight. So it was like, because we were building that mutual understanding, you knew you could take it to a deeper level of what meant more to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so I'm going to invite you to give it a little go, and we haven't got a lot of time, so you don't have to try for ages. And I want to just say to begin with, like, what I've been practicing this for a really long time, so I'm doing quite a lot of paraphrasing rather than directly repeating back. But a really good place to start is you can actually just directly repeat back what the person says.
Okay.
So yeah, just if you just ask me a question, and again, for anyone else watching, I don't know what Sarah's going to ask me, and we'll just do it for like a couple of minutes before opening up, see if there's any questions.
Brilliant, thanks, Robin. Okay, well, I would be intrigued to understand why you said yes to our invitation to come and speak to us today.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, it was really exciting. So I saw Emily's post in a network that I'm part of, seeking speakers. I saw the word trust, I saw the word empathy, which are things that I spend a lot of time thinking about professionally. And in the context of responsible raw materials, it's absolutely bang in the middle of what I'm really passionate about, which is being there to support organizations who are actually trying to do like environmental sustainability and social impact work better. So I'm not I'll pause there.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you with that. So just to reflect that back at you, it's a case here of you really enjoy supporting organizations who want to do things better, especially with regards to that environmental and social aspect. And it was the post that the fabulous Emily managed to put up on LinkedIn with regards to trust and empathy. So those words that really sparked your attention. Is that correct?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, that's probably captured my main reasons. So I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Am I allowed to ask you questions, Robin? Is that part of it?
Yeah. So you mean, are you allowed to ask me follow-up questions, or what?
Yeah.
What's your? Yeah. I mean, it's in terms of right now, I think it's really great if we can open it up just for the last few minutes about the actual process of reflective listening. But if you were actually doing this with someone you were in a room with, like it's a conversation, right? So the reflective listening part is really to make the other person feel heard. But as you are really focusing on your own understanding increasing, questions are absolutely part of that as well. So yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I tell you what, in order to be able to transition into the opening for questions, I'm going to invite everyone to give you a round of applause to say thank you so much, Robin, for coming along and working with us today, because it's fantastic. And also giving us a really practical tool that we can, there's no excuse for us not to be able to use it. I guess it takes practice, but we can go away and use it. So just to open up for any questions, if people have got questions, then either wave at me or pop them into the chat. But what I'm going to do actually is ask our other panelists, do any of you use a form of active listening in what you do? Does anybody use it? So I can see Johannes is nodding. Johannes, do you want to come in on this little discussion now?
Yeah, it's great because in my notes for later today, I've got the reflective listening in the notes. Yeah. And it was really nice to hear this explanation to remind me some of the fundamental values of it. Interestingly, I was first taught about reflective listening in Australia by the mining company that hired me as a graduate. And I've always considered that first, and this was before they let me touch any work. Yeah. So I've always considered that first training period as almost like a second degree. And very nice to hear that sort of validated with your session. And what I particularly picked up on is the aspect, hearing then Sarah's experience of it, the aspect that when you reflect back, you allow the speaker to change gear, or perhaps to correct themselves, or just to change tone, change depth, etc. So that's really, of course, it's valuable for the listener, but it's also very valuable for the speaker to get this sort of feedback. Nice.
Brilliant. Thanks, Johannes. Robin, did you want to reflect on that?
Well, I think that's a lovely reflection of what we experienced there. I'm just curious about one of the questions, responding to one of the questions that I've seen a couple of times.
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
Yeah.
So it was mentioned around, do people get frustrated about the sort of extra length in the conversation? And I think that's possibly the case when you're doing something like an exercise, when you're learning a new technique. But thinking about where you'd actually use this in context, it's actually where you need to have conversations that really matter. And this technique actually enables the person who you're listening to. So it's where you're actually trying to have a conversation with someone who needs you to understand, because something about this really matters to them. And so really being heard actually calms the person down. There's definitely a minute of like, okay, we're slowing this down. We actually want to hear you. So there is a transition, but once, I think, as Sarah found, once you're actually understanding that you're being listened to, you can enter into that deeper level of connection.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Robin. And I'm loving it that lots of people were putting the same question into the chat. And I think with regards to this as well, so it's I suspect, Robin, is an element of technique in terms of the not making it feel like an interruption and actually being able to get in there at a slight lull in somebody's thought process. Is that correct? So it comes with practice.
It does, but I think I think actually some of it is about breaking the convention that interruption is a terrible thing that you shouldn't do. Because I think we've all been in meetings where we just know that the person's just talking and talking because they're kind of going through, they're going through their slides, they've got to get all this information into the space. But actually, often that leads to a meeting where nothing productive has actually happened. And prioritizing understanding, yes, it actually can be awkward. But once you've done it a couple of times and you're actually building relationships with the same people, people will really, really value what you're asking of them, I think.
I'm loving that. So therefore, we've all been given permission to interrupt. Fabulous. Richard, you've got your hand up. On you go.
Yeah, thanks. No, Robin, it's really interesting. I have to say that I've never really done this real time. But I guess what I do a lot with is I listen to students and my students and postdocs. And what we do, if you like, is do that in a closed private space where we'll listen and we'll reflect over them making a presentation before they go out live to the world. And so we do it that way. And I suppose it takes a bit more brave probably to go out and particularly to do it with someone who's only just beginning to get themselves expressing themselves technically in the open world. And I just don't know at what level do you think you should start to implement this? Because I think for some people who are just starting out, that kind of feedback could actually sort of throw them out, because when we do this in a closed session, it's often people have to go away and reflect, come back and sort of represent. And if you did that in real time, I could see that could actually be quite negative.
Yeah, thanks so much, Richard, and I appreciate what you're saying. I think that what this is best suited for perhaps is, where are the key relationships between organizations? So good collaboration between organizations is based on particular relationships between particular people. So identifying who those key people are, and then it's about how do you actually build a relationship of trust between those people specifically. So that can happen one-to-one. In fact, it probably normally does happen one-to-one.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Robin. And thank you as well, Richard, for your reflection in there as well. So with that, everybody, please put your hands together for the wonderful Robin. Brilliant. Round of applause. Fabulous.
Thank you.
So